safe and going to watch more appropriate movies. What are we gonna watch today?
God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside.
Now before I get started with the review, I just want you guys to know I am a Christian, if you haven't been able to go ahead and tell from my freaking YouTube channel. One of the happiest days of my life was the day when I got baptized. So when I actually do start critiquing this movie, it's not because I hate all Christian films or because I think all Christian films are evil or anything like that. It's simply because I really care about my faith. And when someone else is making some other kind of interpretation to promote the faith or to spread the gospel, I'm going to have some major opinions about it. Especially when it comes to film. God's Not Dead left a huge impact on the Christian film community. But on top of that, it was a very controversial film. What made God's Not Dead so controversial? Well, let's delve into this crap fest. Yay. The film opens up with a montage introducing us to a lot of our main characters in this movie. I'll just go ahead and start right now with the critiques. There are a lot of characters in this movie. Honestly, there are just way too many stories to follow. Because of that, I think it honestly has a really bad impact on, honestly, pretty much all the stories that are told in this movie. We're introduced to our main character, Joss Whedon. No, not Joss Whedon, the great director of the Marvel movies. No, Joss Whedon. We're introduced to his character as he's starting to enter college with his girlfriend. He's going into law school and he's starting to apply to this philosophy class. And one of the kids who sees what class he's about to take highly recommends that he doesn't take the class because he notices that he's wearing a cross.
You might want to think about a different instructor.
Gus?
Let's just say you're wandering into the snake pit.
Well, at least the kid was being nice and trying to help him not get into a situation which it could potentially affect his faith and then start an entirely pointless movie. Of course, he decides to take the class, of which we are now introduced to our atheist professor, Professor Radisson. Now, here's when we are actually starting to have the freaking problem in this movie. The big problem that I have starting at this point is the fact that this character is the epitome of what a lot of Christians believe atheists to be like. When in reality, atheists are almost nothing like this guy. Don't get me wrong, there are some very mean-spirited atheists out there, also known as anti-theists, but the thing is, a lot of them just really don't care. Like, you should hear some of the things that this guy is saying in this class.
There is no God. Science and reason have supplanted superstition, and we are all the better for it. Don't worry, you can still go back to your dorm room and sink to your knees and pray at your bedside if you'd like. What you do in your personal life is your business, but what you do in this class is mine. The rest of us having dispensed with primitive superstition, and if you fail, as you shall, you will fail this section and lose 30% of your final grade.
Which then comes down to a whole nother argument. The problem with this professor character is the fact that he is so heavily stereotyped that he almost gets lost in his stereotype. He eventually just starts rambling all these extremely hate-filled things about religion and about the Christian faith and about God, and a lot of this stuff is not allowed in any classroom. A lot of Christians like to go ahead and say, oh, you know, it's because atheists and the school system and colleges and whatever don't like talking about God. In some cases, that is true. In some cases. But they are almost never this mean-spirited. A vast majority of atheists who teach these philosophy classes or anything to do with religion honestly just don't care. So anyway, the professor gives a challenge to the students so that way he can totally ignore one whole portion of the class, which is basically the philosophical argument towards God, of which he tells them all to write down on a piece of paper that
God is dead.
This is a little bit, one, too on the nose. Two, this would arguably never happen in a freaking classroom. After our good old hero Joss decides to not write down that God is dead because it would heavily offend him because he's a Christian, he basically takes up a challenge by the professor to defend God and to prove that God is not dead. I really wish that every time they said God's not dead, they would go ahead and roll the credits. This puts some tension between good old Joss and his girlfriend. Good old Joss makes the argument that he thinks he needs to defend God in this case. And the thing is, I can understand the aspect of defending God. I have been in many situations where I have had to do that. That being said, I also know when to go ahead and just take my fights, carry them, and leave. So, honestly, the girlfriend has a huge huff and a puff because she wants to have a good relationship with this guy. But we take a little bit of a break from this story, and we start focusing on many of the other stories in this movie. And like I said, there's a lot of stories in this movie. There's a story about an Asian guy who's having troubles with his father. There's a story about a Muslim girl who's having issues with her father. And then there's this blogger, who honestly is probably the most interesting character in the whole movie. And honestly, it's these smaller stories that I honestly care about a lot more, and that I wish that they put more emphasis on than this other stupid story, which you could have totally avoided. There's this blogger who's basically this super liberal person who's trying to prove that all Christians and hunters and all that are extreme prudes, and I'm like, okay, whatever. And where she meets one of the people from Duck Dynasty. This is a stupid cameo. Let me just go ahead and say this. When you're in a reality show, it's very different compared to, obviously, acting in an actual freaking movie. Now, I'll go ahead and say this. Their acting is terrible. This whole situation, when he's trying to prove to this blogger why it's okay to talk about God and why they should defend God and also like why it's okay to hunt and all that, it's done so almost robotically. The segue between sentences and the conversation is just extremely unnatural. I mean, just listen to this.
Jesus said this, "Whoever acknowledges me before men, he will acknowledge before the Father in heaven. Whoever disowns me, I'll disown him to the Father." Now those words are written in red, so they're important.
And that's it?
That's it. That's what we're going with.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Your acting is not good. Anyway, now we take a break from her, and now we're focusing on the Muslim girl, who is honestly having issues of her own faith as a Muslim. This is another part of the movie which I'd be very interested in. However, they don't focus on it. It's actually very, very poorly done that I just don't care. For one thing, I would love to find out where this Muslim girl found out about Christianity, or how she got introduced to Christianity, or, you know, why she's even interested in it. There's nothing in there. All it shows is that she's trying to hide her identity as a Muslim and interact with other people. And honestly, there's this one scene right here which I find, I don't really know how to feel about it. But once again, it's one of those situations which, honestly, I find it to be offensive.
You're beautiful. I wish you not to do that.
It's for my father. He's very traditional.
Now, personally, I think there's nothing wrong with Muslim wearing hijabs, or hijabs. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. But the thing is, traditionally, when women went to Catholic masses, they always wore something on their head as a sign of respect. Honestly, I don't see anything wrong with this. And then this freaking white girl just comes out and says, "You shouldn't have to wear that because you're so pretty." I think this scene was just completely unnecessary, and if anything, it was probably more so just offensive towards Muslim garb than it was actually trying to make a freaking point. We've kind of seen the Asian character a few times already. Now, the problem with his character is the fact that I literally just don't care about him. He's literally here, there, and poof, gone. Like, they're trying to, like, make some, like, argument as to why he, you know, that he's very interested in the faith, and that he's kind of like having these struggles about, you know, in his philosophy class, he's talking to his dad, and his dad literally acts like a stereotypical Asian. Once again, very offensive. And then we're introduced to the freaking pastor character. God, I literally hate this character. I hate both of these characters extremely. I hate them almost as much as I hate the main character and the villain of this movie. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a Christian. I complain a lot, and sometimes, I have to, maybe take into consideration my complaining and whatever. One pastor is an extreme Debbie Downer, and once again, I kind of don't get the point of his character, except for the end, which, trust me, I'll get to that very shortly. And then there's this other pastor character who is visiting from some far-off country. I don't get the point of why they're in this movie. They have no effect on the plot, and it's just, I honestly think they're just there to make some freaking message about, oh, stop complaining about the little things, stop being such a Debbie Downer, have faith in God, so on and so forth. And I'm like, okay, God sometimes does understand when you're just having a bad day. You do realize that, right? Honestly, this is one of those situations where I just think that their characters are entirely pointless. Now, as we're going in and out of these stories, we'll also keep coming back to the main character and his struggle with the atheist professor. Honestly, it just gets worse from here. I will go ahead and say that the arguments that Joss is making are not necessarily awful arguments against atheism or against the concept that God does not exist, but they're also very basic arguments that have been made time and time again. And that's the thing. These are not really good arguments. And even the arguments that the atheist professor himself is making, it just seems like they're both making extremely mediocre arguments towards each other. This is just a movie of mediocrity! After the first confrontation, the atheist... Oh gosh, just this scene. Just watch.
Do you think you're smarter than me, Wheaton? Do you think there's any argument you can make that I won't have an answer for? Now, I want to make this clear. In that classroom, there is a God, and yet I'm him. I'm also a jealous God, so do not try to humiliate me in front of my students. I will make it my personal mission to destroy any hope of a law degree in your future. Have a nice day.
Once again, this is a situation where honestly, this freaking kid could go talk to the principal or whoever the hell is in charge of this damn college and say, do you know what? I am feeling personally attacked by this professor. I really think you should tell him to either tone himself down or something. A lot of the situations that come up in this movie, I literally think they could have easily avoided it. They could have just had an actual freaking discussion. Hey, do you know what? I feel persecuted. Hey, this professor's not really acting professional in the classroom. Hey, this professor is literally grabbing me by the shoulder and yelling at me in the freaking hallway! I feel like this is supposed to be building up tension, but in reality, it's just idiotic. I literally feel that this is the beginning of something that I'd like to call, oh jeez, what is it called? A persecution complex. There are points when it literally slaps you in the face. We're Christians! We're persecuted! It's awful! I am a poor, helpless snowflake in a poor, melting world! Once again, don't get me wrong. Christians in America are being persecuted in a way. However, out of the examples that the makers of God's Not Dead decided to show that people are being persecuted in America, I honestly think is extremely weak, and it doesn't help the Christian cause at all. Because there are plenty of actual legitimate ways that Christians are being persecuted in America. And this is just, it's petty. Above anything, this whole thing is just petty. After this, we go back to, keep hopping back and forth between the characters again. And once again, I think the two most interesting characters in the movie, which I really wish they would just expand upon, are the blogger girl and the Muslim girl. But they are basically pushed way into the back so we can focus on this nonsensical situation which could be easily avoided and honestly you could easily fight and defend your faith for. As it turns out, the blogger girl has cancer. This is actually probably the best acting in the movie. You can really see the shock and the pain that is going through this girl when she finds out that she has cancer. I thought she was a very good character. I just wish that the story surrounded more of her. Until we get to this part anyway. We now go ahead and meet the blogger's boyfriend, and... okay, this scene is just... She winds up telling her boyfriend that she has cancer. And what's the first thing he says?
This couldn't wait until tomorrow.
What?
Who says that? The more and more I watch this movie, I wonder if these people even have a grasp on what reality actually is. Do they even realize that people who are not Christians do actually have sympathy for the human person? No? Okay, cool. I guess all people who aren't Christians are assholes. Oh no, you're gonna show more people who are not Christians are assholes, aren't you? Yep, and then we honestly get to one of the most offensive parts of the movie, where the Muslim father finds out that his daughter has been listening to Christian sermons. Honestly, a good portion of Muslims, they don't do this. And at the beginning of this movie, it showed that this family honestly had a good connection with each other. And that he honestly cared about his daughter. That he loved his daughter. And then, all of a sudden, he's like, oh my gosh, you're listening to Christian sermons? Let's not talk about this. I'm just gonna slap you in the face and throw you out of the house. Alright. Oh yeah, I almost entirely forgot about this other plot line. There's a plot line between the atheist professor and his girlfriend, who he knows is a Christian. He just makes the nastiest remarks about her and her faith. He treats her like crap.
And there's only room in this relationship for two, which means I don't get a mistress and you don't get to drag a 2,000-year-old dead carpenter turned itinerant rabbi into our life.
But I actually believe in God.
She's a work in progress.
Once again, do these filmmakers believe that people who are not Christians are just complete assholes? This is just a really crappy situation. And the reason why this makes it into a crappy situation is not because these kinds of people don't exist. They do. It's the fact that we have no character development. We have no introduction. We have no story. We have nothing that actually builds these conclusions with these characters. It's just like, oh, here's a situation. Oh, right, here's a stereotype. Let's throw it in there because all of the crazy freaking right-wing Christians will go ahead and identify with this shit. Using the professor and his girlfriend, for example. It doesn't really get into the reasons why they started dating, why he found her attractive, other than it was just purely physical reasons and a few other things. They don't really delve into the conflict of her being a Christian and him accepting her in their relationship as a Christian. They don't get into any of this. It's the same problem with the Muslim girl. We don't get why she was interested in Christianity in the first place, other than just the fact we see her listening to a few Christian sermons. That's it. There's no platform for us to walk up to get to know these characters. They're just thrown in there. Now, we get to the point of the movie which, once again, it starts to really upset me on a very personal level. We get to the reason why the atheist professor hates Christianity. Or hates God.
When a 12-year-old watches his mother dying of cancer, it's only natural to beg God for her life. Or promise anything to his make-believe grandfather in the sky, including to love and worship him forever, if only he will spare her. She died believing a lie. She died believing that someone out there loved her even while he was strangling her to death.
Now, I can understand where he's coming from to a certain degree. It's also kind of getting into a very shallow reason as to why he hates Christianity so much. Hating God, I can understand. But the thing is, his arguments about, I need to open the eyes of all so that way they can run away from the lies of Christianity and all that jazz. It just seems very shallow from this reason, oddly enough. The reason why I kind of don't like this argument is not necessarily for the reason he left Christianity and decided not to be a Christian anymore. But before we get to this point, here's just another... This part's just funny. I mean, it just makes me laugh, in all honesty.
I made a mistake with you, letting you speak in front of my classroom and spew your propaganda. Well, today, We're gonna change things up a bit.
Now I don't have to deal with your stupidity in this classroom anymore. Once again, this seems just like a very unrealistic thing where you could literally go to whoever's in charge of this freaking school and be like, hey, I feel really under attack and I'm feeling extremely persecuted and abused by this professor. I am having a lot of issues here. How about we have a little discussion about this? Within this last debate, that honestly, I have a lot of issues. They both wind up debating with each other, and the debates, once again, are just not that good on either side. They're not good at all. And then, instead of using actual tactical reasoning in the existence of God, what does he decide to do? He basically decides to cheap shot the professor and kick him in the balls!
Why do you hate God?
This is ridiculous.
Why do you hate God? Answer the question.
Because he took everything away from me. Yes, I hate God. All I have for him is hate.
Yeah, because nothing shows that Christians are extremely loving people than by tearing out an atheist's heart as to why he turned into an atheist in the first place. Just to go ahead and prove his own damn point. Now, I feel like this was supposed to be like a mic drop moment, but honestly, I have no sympathy for Joss at this point. Throughout the entirety of the movie, we're supposed to feel sorry for him. We're supposed to feel bad for him that all these bad things are happening simply because he's fighting for Christ. I don't feel bad for him. Honestly, if anything, there were actual logical situations which you would have been able to go ahead and still fight for Christ while getting through this whole scenario. And honestly, with this last freaking argument, where he literally attacks the professor for why he's an atheist, it's disgusting. It is literally disgusting. And that is something I would never do to even my worst enemy, of attacking the death of a loved one as to why they did not believe in God anymore. Especially in front of a bunch of college students. Of course, this is so inspiring that all the students stand up and say, God's not dead.
God's not dead.
God's not dead. God's not dead. God's not dead. God's not dead. God's not dead. God's not dead.
I bet he still failed the class, though. Of course, the Asian kid is so happy, and he's like, just because of your arguments, I now want to become a Christian. It's almost like saying, hey, because of your arguments, I too want to be a loving asshole. Now that this movie's getting closer to an end, now all of our wonderful, lovable characters are now going to meet in one location, and that's at oh god, it's the Newsboys. So the blogger winds up going to the concert just so that way she can go ahead and bash some more freaking Christians, so that way she can feel better about herself. Or, in this case, as one of the Newsboys points out,
I think you're here kind of wondering, kind of hoping that this stuff is for real, aren't you?
yeah, that's totally the reason why she went to a Christian concert, so that way she can go ahead and learn that all she really needed was Christ, and so on and so forth. I mean, oh god, this scene is so freaking stupid! And once again, her character's arc almost makes complete no sense, and is kind of stupid, because we have barely followed her, or her struggle, or her journey, or the reason why she might even be remotely interested in attacking Christianity, or why she's even remotely interested in Christianity. It doesn't show any of this. We then cut to Professor Radisson, who's looking over a bunch of papers that say God's dead, and then he tries to call up his girlfriend, who's at this point left him, for a very good reason. And he decides to go ahead and try and meet up with her at the Newsboys concert, because, hey, that's where everyone is! Because if you're a Christian, you totally would be meeting up at a Newsboys concert. Now, Professor Radisson is on his way to the Newsboys concert, so that way he can meet up with his girlfriend, and holy crap, he got hit by a car! Well, honestly, he should be fine. It didn't look like...
His ribs are crushed. His lungs are filling with blood.
Oh, okay. Never mind. All the bad things are happening to him and he's basically dying. Wow. This is me being a little bit nitpicky, but it honestly doesn't look like he got hit by the car that badly. Now, of course, the two pastors are there because coincidence! And, of course, the preacher is going on, you know, oh, do you accept Christ in your life? And all this and blah, blah, blah. Now, obviously, I'm not mocking these kinds of situations in reality. However, I am mocking it in this movie because this movie is far from reality. Now, Radisson is kind of like rambling about, like, oh, he's an atheist, he doesn't accept God in his life, he doesn't believe in God, you know, so on and so forth, and blah, blah, blah. But then, all of a sudden, he somehow convinces him on his deathbed to accept Christ in his life, and honestly, I don't know. This whole scene is just off, and it's bad, okay? And then all of a sudden he says, oh, don't worry, you're going to be knowing far more about God than I will very shortly. Oh, yes! That's very comforting. Something that you just said to an atheist who is just on his deathbed saying, oh yeah, sure, I'll go ahead and believe in Christianity. Now, one of the other reasons why this scene doesn't work the way it does, as with the rest of the movie, is because it wasn't built up properly. It doesn't show any redeeming qualities in him. It doesn't show that he wants to turn around and possibly consider Christianity or even look into Christianity. All he's been is a freaking jackass through the whole freaking movie to both his girlfriend and his students. Even in the moment where he looks over the letter from his mother, it doesn't show that he's even remotely interested. It's like a moment like, you know what, I should probably start treating some Christians with a little bit more respect kind of thing. And maybe talk it over with my girlfriend and see how it goes. But no, he gets hit by a freaking car and is like, oh yeah, sure, I'll go ahead and believe in Christianity now that I'm dying. Once again, the big problem with this movie is not necessarily the things that happen in the movie. The problem is the fact that they are not properly built, so it either comes off as extremely cheesy, unrealistic, or just plain downright offensive. And then, honestly, the scene that probably angers me the most is this part. The preachers look over his phone, and one of the texts that he gets is from his girlfriend that says, God's not dead. And what does the preacher say?
What happened here tonight is a cause for celebration.
Yes, yes. This is a moment to rejoice. This is a moment of celebration. Because who wouldn't rejoice when a freaking atheist gets run over by a car? This moment is supposed to be something like, oh, it's a moment to rejoice because of the fact that he turned to God on his deathbed. But I am sorry. If this sentence was said a little further down the line, away from this particular moment when he literally gets run over by a car, don't stand over the freaking dead body saying, huh, this is a moment to rejoice. You don't. It's done in very poor taste, and if anything, it's more so showing that you're rejoicing over the fact that a freaking atheist just died. What the hell is wrong with you people? The actual main plot of this movie is not interesting, the characters are all stupid, and the things that we aren't even slightly remotely interested in when it comes down to this movie are the characters who do not get enough screen time, and because of the fact they don't get enough screen time, they're just like overstuffed and just like shoved to the freaking side, and you don't actually get a good concept of why they're turning to Christianity or why they're doing what they're doing, because we're focusing on this stupid freaking storyline of a senseless, stupid kid who has this ridiculous persecution complex of needing to defend the faith when he could have easily defended it in an actual legal setting, and he didn't have to do this in the freaking classroom! You know what I would rather do than ever ever watch this movie again, I'd rather spend an eternity in purgatory. I'd rather go through the 9 layers of hell while listening to Dante complain about how much his life sucks. I want to watch The Passion 40 times in a row and cry and tell Jesus of how sorry I am that we make this kind of crap in His name. This film is nothing but a freaking disgrace to what Christians truly and actually believe in and what we actually struggle and try to fight for. This movie is one of the biggest pieces of shit that I've ever seen in my entire life. And if I were to ever meet the creators of this movie, I would tell them what a cheap, no good, rotten, low quality, snake licking, dirt eating, persecution complex, ignorant, overstuffed, blood sucking, dog kissing, brainless, Christless, hopeless, bug-eyed, stiff-legged, worm-headed piece of donkey crap this movie is!